stage is yours.
Hi, everybody. It's good to see so many of you in person here. So thank you for showing up. And I'll take the next half an hour to bore you a little bit with a not so pleasant topic, which is the processes, right? Nobody really likes processes, so we'll try to make this fun, okay? Let me see how this one works. So we'll discuss about the SDV process, about the SDV Maturity Badges program, about the evaluations and how these are connected to the badges, what is currently in work, and a sneak peek into the future activities, so into our next phases. Now, when we talk about processes, and especially about the SDV process as the process coming out of the SDV working group, we really need to look at the scope, purpose, and goal before talking about the actual criteria and adhering to those criteria. So the scope of the SDV process, I think this is the first thing we need to start with, is it is limited to the projects of the SDV working group. And again, this is not a mandatory thing. It's based on offering to adopt the process. Ideally, all of the projects within the SDV working group will be adopting the process because the purpose of this process is to define, establish, through the community collaboration and consensus, a set of best practices that would be relevant for the software-defined vehicle projects in the open source community. Now, this is a little bit different than what we would normally see within the companies that we've been used to work for so far, because it has to be taking into account our first value, which is code first. So we're not going to take all the steps in the same order that you would normally see in a normal corporate environment. And finally, the goal of the process is to increase the quality of our projects and also the adoption of our projects. Going into the criteria, so far we've defined 5 main criteria, and you can read the definition of those into the definition of badges and their flavors. The link is there. You can access it through the slides after the event. We have 5 criteria set. Each of them has 3 levels. So we are starting low base, first of all, ensuring that everybody that adopts the process is gonna have the necessary artifacts to fulfill those criteria, and then slowly, progressively, we're gonna go into level 2 and level 3 into increasing the quality for those artifacts. There are also 2 more criteria, let's call them like that. One of them is integration, and the second one is OSS best practices. The first one, the integration, is actually referring to the blueprints. So more and more of the projects, whether they are going to adopt the SDV process or not, will need to have the blueprints in place, because that's the way of showcasing what the project actually does. And the second one, as I said, the OSS best practices, that's actually something that we require through the Eclipse development process. So it's more proving that the project is adhering to the OSS community, OSS environment. Now, talking about the adherence, as I said previously, adoption of the SDV process is not mandatory. We're not going to force anyone or any project to adopt the process. Each project is going to do this based on the needs of the project and on the willingness to get it adopted. There will be some projects like tooling projects, for example, that might not even need to adhere to such a process, because those projects will not go directly into the vehicle. They will mainly have the role of instrumentation of the vehicle, of working outside with the vehicle. So for those, there's no need to actually adopt the process. But for the ones that want to adopt the process, we would like to hear back from the project leads stating officially that they want to do this. Why? Because adopting the process also comes together in a package with evaluating the projects against the criteria which will be defined in the process. These evaluations, as we've discussed so far, will be done mainly for the releases of the projects. So we're not going to do evaluations in between the releases. There's no point of doing that because, as said, the projects in the open source environment are not following the same flow as a project within a normal corporate environment. Now, talking about these evaluations, we'll have two stages. The first one is the automated stage, through which we ensure that the artifacts that are necessary to fulfill those criteria actually exist. And again, I said, these will be done automatically, so it's really easy to put it in practice. While the second one, the manual one, is going more into the actual quality of the contents of those artifacts. This will be the second stage, and we're still going to have to work a little bit more on that. Going into the maturity badges, so first of all, again, going into scope, purpose, and goal, it's actually a program. I wouldn't directly link the maturity badges program to the process. It's more an awarding system, if you want, after adopting the process and getting evaluated against the process. The main goal of this maturity badges program is to showcase the level of maturity of the projects within our working group and to increase the confidence in their quality. And as a result of that, to increase adoption of those projects. So as a first showcase of the badges, this is the first version that we're going to have for the badges. As said before, 5 criteria with 3 levels each: documentation, requirements, coding guidelines, testing, and release process. And as levels, bronze, silver, gold. Hopefully you'll like these to be shown on your project websites and also on the SDV websites next to your project name. And as an example of how this would look like, just taking the requirements criteria into account. So for level 1, the project requirements are documented. Again, just checking the existence of those requirements. Level 2, the requirements are comprehensive and their changes are tracked in the release notes. And level 3, the requirements are referenced by commits or PRs and test cases. Similarly, the rest of the 4 criteria will follow the same line with the 3 levels. A little bit about the automated evaluations. These automated evaluations are actually taking us a step further into metrics. So we have built together with part of our colleagues within the Eclipse Foundation staff, we have built a metrics website where all the working groups are showcasing their projects. This is already live. You can check the statistics that come out of those metrics. But in particular for the SDV working group, you can check the information related to the projects individually. So the automated part of the evaluation will only check for the existence of those artifacts and will display a quote-unquote badge. As you can see over there, documentation success, that's an example. These quote-unquote badges that are shaped currently in the shape of a button, those will be replaced with the badges I've just shown you previously. And over here you have a sample of how the badges will get displayed in the different environments. So on the SDV website and on the Eclipse Foundation overall website, when you look for the list of the projects, next to the project and to the download section of each project, there will be a section displaying the badges associated with the respective project. Similarly, on the projects page, whether you have directly the PMI page within the Eclipse Foundation, you'll have the badges displayed over there, or if you have your own website for the project, you'll have the badges displayed over there as well. And as said, the manual evaluations part still needs to be defined, so we'll look forward to getting more involvement from the community regarding this with ideas and potentially additional automation that we can bring it here so we can minimize the effort and time. And what's currently in work, well, in order to do these evaluations, we need to know some data, some information about your project. Mainly, where exactly would you expect to have those artifacts that would fulfill those criteria? So we've been talking for the past 2 months in the SDV process meetings about project configuration files or repository configuration files. That's where we would expect to see that metadata coming out of your projects and your repositories. We already have some ideas and the prototype for this, and we'll be discussing this a bit more in detail in the hands-on second track that we'll have tomorrow. So looking forward to get you there. And as a follow-up from that, we also want to minimize the effort in actually producing those project configuration files. So one solution that we've been thinking and juggling around with was to create some Git actions in which we would define the steps for generating those files and have this as part of the process of the project release workflow. So the more we dig into this, we'll also get to touch the process release of the projects. And now, looking a little bit into the future, we'll have our first official process release mid-April, the really official one. Once we'll have it, we'll also link it onto our website so that it's really easy to find, read through it, follow it, pop questions, or hopefully change requests and such. Secondly, we want to do the actual deployment. So by mid-April, I can promise you we'll have all the projects that have already solicited to adhere to the project, to the process, have this automated evaluation in place and have the first badges generated for them. The third one would be the show-off. So, right, we want to see the badges, not just talk about them. And this will come together with the deployment of the automated evaluations. So by mid-April, we should see those badges on the websites. And last but not least, we'll also publish some instructions. These instructions are both for insiders and outsiders, to put it like that. So both for projects that would like to know, okay, these are badges, they are nice to have, but how the heck do I get one? What do I need to do? So those instructions should provide enough insight into that. But then also, I'm an adopter. What do these badges say? Should I adopt that project? Should I not? Is it a good sign or a bad sign? What do those badges stand for? So those instructions should provide details on this topic as well. Looking a little bit further into the future, I'm going to go away a little bit to document the development process from the ThreatX project. Given it's already a certified, a functional safety and cybersecurity certified project, I think it's quite important to look at the development process that they have already in that project and share the insights with the SDV community. We might actually even see much more value in that development process than in the one we're constructing now, or we can take parts of it and include those into our software development process. And the second part is we'll also need to give the project teams time to work on the artifacts that will fulfill the criteria specified in our process. So just the fact that the artifacts exist is not enough. In order for us to go further to the next step, the manual evaluation, we need to work on the actual quality, on the contents of those artifacts. So we'll also use this time to give the projects enough space to work on improving those artifacts. And even further down the line, we would like to define and establish the rules around the manual evaluations. We have a lot of projects already. We'll have even more in the future. Unfortunately, I'm just one and can only do so much, so I'll need help with the manual evaluations as well. Potentially, we might need to set up like an evaluation committee or something like that. I don't know, I'm just throwing stuff on the table for you guys to think about. And we'll need to start with those evaluations, right? And finally, we'll need to discuss this development process from the ThreadX project and see how much we will have in common with it. How much of it can we reuse? Is it that by adopting that process, is that gonna help us in getting a lot closer to being certifiable from a functional safety point of view, or is it not gonna help? That's a conversation to have in the future. But just for you to know what's coming and to get ready for it, these are subjects to think about. So that was all from my side. Now I'm expecting questions if you have any.
Yeah, thank you, Dana. And I mean, you did an amazing job, but really, I cannot stress enough how important and crucial this activity is for us. And I've seen already some of the project leads that agreed to participate in this, but we really want and need more. Also, your feedback is extremely appreciated. Do reach out to Dana. Do let us know what you think, what we can improve. Because really, what we are doing here is we are trying to make your project as adoptable as possible. So please help us with this. And okay, any question? Yeah, Maria.
Hi, maybe you mentioned this already, so apologies. Is this only for projects or also for blueprints? And if it's for blueprints, is there a difference or additional considerations?
That's a very good question. Thank you. We actually had a discussion about this, and Nachi is here in the audience. He can confirm. There's already a tiny draft proposal for a blueprints badge, so we'll be adopting that as well. I wouldn't consider it as part of the SDV process, but rather part of the maturity badges program. They are still linked, so there's no disconnect there, but we'll have that as well.
Thank you, Diana. I have also a question. Is there any plans to link the checks you do for the evaluation with checks that's also done in other process-related activities like ASPICE or SPICE, so that it's easy to map, easy to reuse?
Thank you for the question. Again, a very good one. The idea when we started constructing this SDV process was to take best practices at the beginning, the low-level ones from ASPICE, functional safety, cybersecurity, SOTIF. Well, I'd say these 4 standards would be the driving ones for the automotive industry, but that's the key. Those are the key elements that we are trying to bring into the SDV process. Actually, I've built a mapping file, which I'll soon share also within the community, with key elements from the ASPICE requirements and how exactly they are seen into our process. But at the moment, we have so little, to be honest, in our process, that this mapping doesn't really make sense to be shown. But yeah, to limit the answer, yes, we are taking into account the requirements from the 4 mentioned standards. You're welcome.
Yeah, and for those of you who don't know, Dana is an ASPICE assessor, so she can assess if our process is close to it.
Well,
Okay.
I shouldn't, because
But
then I'd be
yeah,
sort of assessing myself. but
Yes,
but
and
yeah.
the answer is very far. So. Any additional question? Yeah.
Not so much a question as a feedback. So I'm very happy about what you presented today. I spend most of my time nowadays with Ace Consulting, and I have a lot of questions from my colleagues. What criteria do we have for integrating open source software into series software or parts of series software? And the question is always, okay, according to which process the open source software was developed? Is it certifiable? Does it fulfill the standards regarding functional safety or cybersecurity? So I think this is a very big step forward in this area, and I'm very happy that you presented this program today.
Awesome, thank you. We really appreciate. I think it's important to get feedback on this, because then we can steer the way we go together with the community. But without the feedback, we don't really know whether the community finds value in this or not. So thank you.
So, any other question? We still have a few minutes. Yeah. And then I'm coming to you.
Hi, thanks for a great presentation. Since not maybe every project is targeted at functional safety, how would this be tackled then with the badges and with the levels? Should there be then another level then for functional safety readiness or another badge for this?
I wouldn't necessarily make it as another badge. And thank you for the question, by the way, because I'm pretty sure other people have the same question in their mind. I would say rather we should compartmentalize based on the badges. So some badges will be relevant for the functional safety side of things, some might not. And ideally, I would split the projects into categories. So in-vehicle software projects, outside of the vehicle software project. For the outside ones, I wouldn't focus on functional safety. It would be a waste of time. We have enough resources for the outside the vehicle so that we don't need to look into functional safety or, well, maybe cybersecurity, yeah. But for what's in the vehicle, I would say it's a must.
All right, thanks.
You're welcome.
And maybe to add to this, that's a really valid question, because what we want to evolve into is also providing a tool chain. So if you have a piece of this tool chain, of course, it doesn't need to be safety relevant assessed. So, question.
Thank you. It's Lucas again. I have a question on the requirements batch, and I was just wondering, I really like the sort of stepped, the three different levels you define from the bronze all the way to gold. But I was wondering, do you look at the quality of the requirements, quality of the artifacts as well, like checking the characteristics of the requirements, like what are the sort of attributes that you define along with those requirements, or is it purely looking at how you use requirements, whatever that might be, in your process?
Thank you for the question. I think it's good to clarify this. So in the first stage, as said, the automated stage of the evaluations, we're going to look at things from a quantitative perspective. So do the artifacts actually exist? We're not going to look whether they are complete, whether they are comprehensive, whether they are properly written and such. We're going to look at them, do they exist? In the second and third stages, we'll be looking at things from a qualitative perspective. So in the second stage, I'd say we'll look whether they've been written correctly. So talking about the requirements in particular, are they actually requirements or are they use cases, for example? You know, and then in the third step of the badge, we're going to look at the actual connection between, you know, requirements, development, testing, and such. So to shortly answer your question would be, at this moment, right now, we're not looking into the quality of the artifacts. This is the next stage. And for that, I'm happy to have so many of you here interested in the topic, because we need inputs on how exactly to define things around us.
That's great, thank you.
You're welcome.
Great. Any other question from the audience? And tomorrow there is going to be a workshop on configuration files, so to help us help you, basically. Yeah.
So first of all, thanks for the great presentation. I have one question about documentations for the projects. Are there any plans to have consistent and unique documentations across all the projects, or also some quality checks planned for the future, or is it completely up to the projects team how to design and what content to present in the documentation and in which format, for example?
So I'm afraid on this one, and first of all, thank you for the question, because it's a really good one, it's really important for the actual adoption of the project. We're going to try and define something in between, because we've started with the SDV process at this stage where we already have projects with loads of contents in them already. It's kind of hard to come in and change the game, you know? And it doesn't make sense. So ideally, we will come up with something that fits the current setup, doesn't change projects too much. So we're not going to look into the configuration management, for example, of the projects. That's going to be left up to the projects to define. We can put together some guidelines or some recommendations, if you want. More like recommendations and not actual requirements from the side of the SDV process. But when it comes to actual documentation, we can establish some samples of documents and mandatory documents that should be in there, like user guideline, like a installation guideline, I don't know, test reports guideline, stuff like this, for which we can also define templates and supply these to the project. We're not going to go in a full-blown set of documentation templates, because again, this is the open source community. We're not in a corporate environment where you need everything documented, right? I hope that answers your question.
Yes, of course. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay.
And just a comment on that, we have been working with the new technical writer of the SDV working group. What's his name again? I always forget. Craig, yeah, exactly. We created a README template file for the projects to use, which is based on best practices regarding its structure, what should be in it regarding purpose, background of the project, what technology is used, pointers to installation instructions, a quick run like a getting started guide or something. So that is basically the focus of the first step or the first level in the badges program for documentation, having a properly written README file. Then the next step is more about focusing about user documentation, and the third step about providing system documentation for contributors or for people who want to take this further. And I think that is, mostly centered around best practices in the industry and not so much about format or content or whatever.
And that's a very valid comment. Thank you, Kai, for that. We should advertise a little bit more on that side, so I'll take care of doing that. Thank you.
Okay, let's just check if there is a question online. Low battery, okay. Okay, I see no questions, but we are at 2%, so we'll see. Okay, so thanks a lot, Anna.
Thank you all. I hope you have a nice event as well.